The job posting said overnight site integrity associate. That's what it said. $41,000 a year. Health and dental after 90 days. Must be able to lift 50 pounds and walk unassisted for extended periods. What it meant was night watchman at a dead mall. And what it actually meant was a 52-year-old man with a wrecked back sitting in a Ford Ranger in an empty parking lot from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, checking a building nobody's wanted since 2009. So an insurance company in Delaware can keep saying the property is monitored. I took it in March. I had reservations going in. They were the normal kind. The lot's 400 yards from the highway with no lights working, and the nearest gas station is 11 minutes out, and there's no cell signal inside the building because it's built like a bunker with a skylight. Those were the reservations. That's the whole list. Northlight Commons sits on 90 acres outside of town. I'm not going to name because there's maybe 6,000 people there, and about 4,000 of them would know exactly who I am inside of a day. Call it what everybody local calls it, the ghost. As in, you working out at the Ghost tonight, Vern? As in, my brother-in-law stripped copper out of the Ghost in 2015 and got 2 years for it. The place was supposed to be a big deal. Ground broke in 2007. 2 department store anchors signed letters of intent. There was going to be a 16-screen theater, a food court with a carousel in it, an actual carousel. They had the horses ordered from a company in Ohio. The developer was a guy named Chet Bowden, who put his own money in and then a lot of other people's money in. And when the financing collapsed in 2009, the construction crews walked off a site that was maybe 80% done, and that was that. The horses got delivered anyway. Nobody ever came for them. They're still in a shipping crate in the loading bay, behind where the food court would have been. And I checked once, early on, because I was bored and I had a flashlight and a pry bar. They're beautiful, hand-painted, 12 of them, wrapped in wax paper, sitting in the dark for 16 years, waiting for a floor to be bolted to. That's the kind of thing that gets in you about the place. Not scary, just sad in a way that sits down next to you and doesn't leave. The scary part took a while. Here's what you have to understand about the layout, and I'll try not to turn this into a real estate seminar. The mall's a 2-story ring, center court in the middle with a skylight, 4 wings coming off it like a plus sign, anchor pads at the end of each wing that never got built out. North wing, east wing, south wing, west wing, ring corridor on the upper level, connecting all 4 so you can walk a full circle without going back through center court. Except you can't. The ring doesn't close. Between the north wing and the east wing, up on the 2nd level, there's a stretch of maybe 60 feet that's just a drywall partition. Framed, hung, taped, never painted. Dead end on both sides. If you walk the upper ring, you go all the way around and hit that wall and have to turn around and go back the way you came. I asked about it my first week. The property manager, woman named Marla Quist, who works out of an office in Bloomington and has never once set foot in the building she manages, told me the north to east connector was quote-unquote descoped in the final construction phase. Money ran out. They walled it off. Fine. Reasonable. Except the electricals run through it. There's conduit going into that partition on the north side and conduit coming out on the east side. And it's the same conduit. And it doesn't stop, which means whatever's in there is finished and energized and sealed inside a wall. Also, the mall was designed by a man named Emil Drager, who was 68 when he took the contract and who died in 2008 in his home office in Duluth, with a set of revised floor plans on the desk in front of him. Hart. His firm's partners finished the drawings from his notes. The building that got built does not match the drawings that got filed with the county. It's not a small difference either. I've had both sets in my hands. The as-built has corridors the plan doesn't, and the plan has a courtyard the building doesn't, and the county doesn't care because the building's been sitting empty since before the last guy retired. None of that scared me either. I'm a guy who worked 11 years at a plant that made hydraulic fittings. Buildings are weird. Contractors cut corners. Blueprints lie. The corridor times are when I started keeping a notebook. But I have to back up, because otherwise the rest of it makes me sound like an idiot, and I've been called worse, but not that. My son's name was Corey. He'd be 31 now. He was 26 when they found him in a room at the Cedar Crest Motel, out on Highway 10. And there was a text message on his phone he never sent. The message said, "Hey Dad." That's all. 2 words, sitting in the box, undelivered, at 4 a.m. on a Wednesday in October. I've never been able to decide if I'm glad I know that or not. Corey had a daughter. Her mother took off when the girl was 6 months old and has sent exactly 2 birthday cards since, both with money in them, which I guess counts for something. So the kid came to me. She was 3 when Corey died, and she's 9 now, and her name is Maisie, after my mother. And she's got Corey's chin and my mother's laugh, and she is, without any exaggeration whatsoever, the only reason I've gotten out of bed on some mornings. Maisie was born with something called biliary atresia. What it means is the ducts that drain your liver don't work, and if nobody does anything about it, you die before you're 2. She had surgery at 11 weeks that didn't take, and a liver transplant at 14 months that did. She's got a scar across her belly, like somebody drew a wide smile on her with a ballpoint pen, and she thinks it's cool, and she's right, it is cool. She takes tacrolimus twice a day, 8 in the morning, 8 at night, and if the level in her blood drops, her own body starts eating the liver. A dead person's family was generous enough to give her when she was 1 year old. There's no vacation from it. There's no "we'll skip a week." It's every day for the rest of her life, and it costs, with the good insurance, $140 a month, and without insurance, a number I've seen on paper and am not going to repeat because it makes my hands shake. That's the leash. That's the whole thing. The ghost has a benefits package. The other half of the leash is that nobody else will hire me. And there's a reason for that. And the reason has 2 parts. Part 1 is my back. 1996, I was 22 years old and working the loading side at that fittings plant, and a tow motor with a bad parking brake rolled about 6 feet and put me into a rack, upright. Crushed 2 discs and did something to my right shoulder that 4 surgeries have not entirely resolved. Comp doctor in Brainerd put me on Percocet in November of that year, and I did not stop taking Percocet, or the things that came after Percocet, until March of 2014. 18 years. Let me be plain about what that is, because people hear addict and they picture a bad stretch, maybe a bad year. 18 years is a whole adulthood. That's my 20s and my 30s and a good chunk of my 40s. The pills first, and then the cheaper pills, and then the thing that's cheaper than the pills. And Charlene left in 2006, and I did not blame her then, and I don't now. Corey was 12 when I hit the bottom of it. Old enough to remember. Old enough to have gone through my coat pockets, looking for the car keys, and found what else was in there. I got clean in March of 2014. 11 years now. Not a slip. Not once. And I don't say that to be congratulated. I say it because the number is load-bearing. Because I got exactly 5 good years of being a decent father to that boy before he took the same road out of the same town in the same way. And in 6 years, I have not once been able to convince myself those 2 facts are unrelated. I taught him the shape of it. That's what I've got. Part 2 is what I did about it. In 2020, I found out who sold Corey the batch that killed him. Not a mystery, not detective work. The guy's cousin told me at a gas station because he thought it was funny. And I found him at a bar in Wadena on a Saturday, and I put him through a window, and then I kept going after he was through it, on the sidewalk, with people watching and one of them filming. He lived. He's fine, actually. Runs a lawn care business now, which is the kind of joke God tells. I did 14 months at Moose Lake and came out with a felony assault conviction. And let me tell you what a felony assault conviction does to a 50-year-old man in a county with a shrinking population. It doesn't make you unemployable. It makes you specifically employable for exactly the jobs nobody else will take, at exactly the wage nobody else will accept, for exactly the companies that don't have anybody local to run the background check. Which is how I ended up working for a contract security outfit headquartered in Boise that pays me through a payroll processor in Nevada to sit in a parking lot in Minnesota. I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry about the guy in the window. I'm sorry about a lot of things. That's not on the list. And if that makes me a bad man, then fine. I'm a bad man who packs a 9-year-old's lunch every morning with the crust cut off because she's finally at the age where she notices. So when I say I couldn't quit, I don't mean it was hard to quit. I mean there was nowhere to go. There was one door, and I was already standing in it. The building knew that. I'm about 90% sure the building knew that from the first night.
Grandpa, does the mall have stores in it? No, dummy. I know it doesn't have stores now. I mean, did it ever? Like, was there ever a Claire's? What's a Claire's? Nova said her mom used to get her ears pierced at a Claire's in a mall, and I said that sounds fake. But if there's no stores, what do you guard? Like, what are you guarding? The walls? That's so boring. That's the most boring job I've ever heard of in my entire life. Can I come sometime? I'd be quiet. I'd bring my tablet and I would be so quiet you wouldn't even know I was there.
I told her no. The first time she ever asked, back in April. I told her no, and I told her no, every single time after that. And there were a lot of times after that. The corridor times. My route is 4 sweeps a night. 10:15, midnight, 2:30, 5. Each sweep is the same. Exterior perimeter in the truck, then interior on foot, lower ring clockwise, up the dead escalator at the south wing, upper ring counterclockwise until I hit the partition, back the way I came, down through center court, out the west service door. It takes 55 minutes. It took 55 minutes in March, and 55 minutes in April, and 55 minutes the first 2 weeks of May. Then one night, in the middle of May, it took 38. I figured I'd rushed it. I was tired. Maisie'd had a rough clinic visit that week. I probably hustled. So the next sweep I timed it deliberate, walked it like a man walking a dog, 52 minutes. The one after that, 71. Same route, same doors, same pace. Nothing detoured, nothing skipped. And I noticed I was measuring the wrong thing. So I started splitting it. North wing separate from east, separate from south, separate from west. North wing is the one. North wing, upper level, from the top of the stairs to the partition. It's 210 feet. I paced it with a measuring wheel from my truck on a Tuesday. 210 feet. And if you walk it at a normal clip, you should cover that in about 50 seconds. Going north, it took me 54 seconds. Coming back, it took me 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I did it 8 times that night. Every single time, same result. Longer coming back. Not a little longer. 3 times longer. And the whole way back, my flashlight beam was hitting the same storefronts in the same order. The sunglass hut that never opened, the space with the plywood over it, the escalator alcove, in order, and it just took longer. I sat in my truck afterward and ate a gas station sandwich and told myself I'd miscounted. And I'm not dressing that up, because it's the last time I remember successfully lying to myself.
You're gonna think I'm messing with you. No, Vern, listen. Sit down. You did the wheel thing? The measuring wheel? I did that in February. And I wrote it in the log, and Marla called me and asked me to take it out of the log. Her exact words. She said, "Wes, the log is a legal document, and the log needs to reflect standard patrol activity." And I said, "Marla, the North Wing is eating time." And she said, "Wes, the log needs to reflect standard patrol activity." So I took it out, because I got 2 kids and an ex-wife and a truck payment, same as you got whatever you got. And then I stopped going up the North Wing. I stopped going up it. I do the lower ring, I go up the south escalator, I do the east side, I turn around at the plywood, I come back down. North Wing gets an exterior look from the parking lot, and that's it. Been doing that for 4 months. And nobody said a word because nobody's reading it, Vern. Nobody in Boise or Bloomington or wherever has ever read a single word either of us has written. Do what you want. But if you're gonna keep walking it, do me one favor. Don't walk it at 3:14.
He wouldn't say more than that. Wes Pelkey, 41. Worked the Wednesday through Saturday, overnight to my Sunday through Tuesday. And we overlapped exactly once a week, at shift change for about 10 minutes in the lot, with the trucks nose to nose and the windows down. He was a good guy. I don't know which. I'll get there. He wouldn't explain 314. He said, "Don't walk it at 3:14. And then he said something about his kids' hockey and rolled his window up. So, obviously, I walked it at 3:14. Not that night. I'm not brave. I'm just persistent, which is a much worse quality. I waited 9 days, and on a Monday in late May, I stood at the bottom of the south escalator at 3:08 in the morning with my flashlight off, because there's enough moon through the skylight to see by, and I waited. Here's what happens at 3:14 at Northlight Commons. The escalator runs. Let me lay this out carefully. The south escalator has no power. It has never had power. The motor housing is open at the bottom because somebody stripped the drive components out years ago. You can look right into the pit and see where the chain would go. And there is no chain. It's a stationary metal staircase with rubber handrails. That's all it has been for 16 years. At 3:14, the handrails moved. Not the steps. The steps stayed put. The handrails, those two black rubber loops on either side, started tracking upward at exactly the speed a working escalator handrail moves. Smooth and quiet. No motor sound, no vibration, nothing. Just two lines of black rubber climbing into the dark. They ran for 110 seconds. I counted, because counting was the only thing my brain could think of to do. At 110 seconds, they stopped, and the building settled, and somewhere up on the second level, a metal security gate rattled the way they do when air moves. And I stood at the bottom of that escalator in the dark, and I said, out loud, to nobody, well, that's just great. I saw it 4 nights later, June 2nd. 2:30 sweep, running late because I'd stopped in the truck to text Maisie's care coordinator about a lab draw, which means I came up the south escalator at 3:11 instead of 2:40. And I was on the upper ring in the east wing when the handrails started. And I heard them start, that soft rubber-on-roller hush, from 100 yards away. I stopped. I put my back against the security gate of a store that was never a store, and I turned my flashlight off because whatever part of your brain handles this stuff decided all on its own that being dark was better than being able to see. And something came up the escalator. I don't have great words for this. I've had a year, and I still don't. I'm going to describe it, and it's going to sound stupid, because the thing about the actual article is that it's not stupid at all. It's the most serious thing I've ever been in a room with. It was tall, 9 feet, maybe more, and it had to duck under the soffit where the ring corridor narrows, and it ducked smoothly, like a man who's lived in a house with a low doorway his whole life. That's the detail that broke something in me. It knew the building, gray. Not a color exactly the gray of drywall mud before you sand it, that chalky, nothing gray. And the surface of it had that same dull texture. Long. Everything about it was one step too long. The arms, the fingers, the neck, like somebody had drawn a person from a description over the phone. And its face. Its face was a face, the way a mannequin's face is a face. Smooth planes where the features should be, a suggestion of a nose, and 2 shallow depressions where eyes go, no eyes in them. A mouth that was just a seam, a horizontal line, closed. It came up onto the upper ring and it turned to the left, toward the north wing, and it started walking, and it browsed. That's the word. That's the only word. It walked the ring at the exact pace of a person killing 45 minutes in a shopping mall on a Saturday. Unhurried, hands loose at its sides. And every so often it stopped at a storefront, an empty one, a hole in the wall with a metal gate over it, and bare studs behind. No glass, no sign, no fixtures, nothing. And it turned toward the opening, and it stood there, looking at nothing, for maybe 15 or 20 seconds. Then it turned its head, and I mean its head. The head rotated on that too long neck, about 110 degrees, past where a neck goes, casual as a man checking a price tag, and it looked across the corridor at the storefront on the other side. And then it kept walking. It did that 6 times, between the escalator and the north wing. 6 stops. And at the 4th one, the one that would have been a shoe store based on the tile pattern, it raised its hand and made a small motion in the air about waist height, palm up, fingers spreading slightly, like it was picking something up off a display table to look at. There was no table, There was a concrete slab with adhesive scars on it, and that thing stood in the dark, holding nothing in its hand and turning it over. I don't know how long I was against that gate. Long enough that my legs locked. It went up the north wing, and I lost it in the dark, past the range of the moonlight. And I didn't hear it come back. And at some point, the sky through the skylight went from black to that dirty gray blue, and it was 4:50 in the morning, and I was sitting on the floor of the upper ring in a puddle of my own piss, like an animal. I drove home. I made Maisie an egg sandwich. She told me about a girl at school who eats glue on purpose. I said, huh. I got her on the bus at 7:40. Then I sat in my truck in the driveway for 2 hours and did not move. Sunday, I went back. Everybody who hears this is going to want to know why. And I've already told you why. And the answer doesn't get better with repetition. 8 in the morning and 8 at night. $140 a month with insurance. There is no version of this where I hand in a badge over a tall gray man and go get a job at the co-op because the co-op ran my name in 2022, and the manager wouldn't look at me in the parking lot for a year afterward. Also, and this is the part I'm less proud of, I wanted to see it again. Not because I'm brave, because when a thing like that happens, your whole life reorganizes around it. And mine had been organized around a dead son and a sick kid for 6 years, and something in me was so goddamn relieved to have a new center of gravity that I mistook it for courage. There's a version of that feeling I already knew. Anybody who's been where I've been knows it. It's the feeling of a problem so big it eats all the smaller ones, and God help me, it is restful. So Sunday, I went back, and I did my sweeps, and nothing happened. Same Monday, same Tuesday. 9 days of nothing. The handrails ran at 3:14, and I stayed on the lower level and drank coffee, and told myself the whole thing had been a rough patch. The voices started June 18th. There's a paging system in that mall. Ceiling speakers every 40 feet. A head-end unit in the electrical room behind center court with a microphone on it that was never plugged in, and the whole system runs off a panel that has been dead since the day the crews walked. I've had that panel open. There's no power to it. There isn't a battery in it. There is a rat's nest in the bottom of the cabinet that has been abandoned so long, it's gone to dust. At 1:50 in the morning on June 18th, standing in the lower ring outside where the orange Julius was going to go, I heard a woman clear her throat over the ceiling speakers. Just that. A small polite ahem, like somebody about to make an announcement about a lost child. And then she said my name.
Mr. Nyholm, the west service door is not latching correctly. It sticks. You've noticed. Leave it open tonight. Just tonight. It's a small thing, and it will save you the trouble of the shoulder. And your shoulder is not what it was, is it, Vern? 1996. That tow motor and that parking brake had been written up twice. Leave the west door open. You may go home early. Nobody is coming. Nobody has come in 16 years. Maisie is asleep on the couch again. She does not like the bed since the ambulance. You know this, and you have not asked her about it, because you are afraid of what she will say. Leave the door open, Mr. Nyholm.
Nobody has said my name that way since my grandmother died in 1988, and I was 14 years old, and there is no living person who could have told it that. And let me be honest about what I did, because the whole rest of this depends on it. I left the door open, not because I believed it, and not because of my shoulder, though my shoulder is in fact wrecked from a tow motor in 1996, which is a thing exactly 4 people alive know about. I left it open because I was so scared that the only available option my brain could produce was obey and get to the truck. I sat in the lot until 6, with the engine running and the doors locked, and a tire iron across my lap like a moron. Nothing came out. Nothing went in. At 5:50, I went back and pulled the door shut, and it latched fine. It latched perfect, and I drove home and made an egg sandwich. That's how it starts. Not with a deal, and not with a sacrifice. With a door you were already having trouble with. After that, it was every shift. Never the same voice, twice. Sometimes the woman, sometimes a man with a flat Fargo accent, once a kid, which was the worst one by a mile, but always the same architecture to it. Always something small. Always something reasonable. Don't log the broken skylight panel in the north wing. Marla won't approve the repair anyway, and it'll only put your name on a work order. There's a nest of scrappers coming Thursday. Let them in. The camera on the east loading dock is gonna fail. Don't report it for 2 weeks. And every single request came wrapped in something it shouldn't have known. My mother's maiden name. The song that was on the radio when the state patrol called me about Corey. The date, in March of 2014, not the month. The date, the actual day, which is a number I have never written down anywhere and have said out loud maybe 11 times in a church basement. And the precise number of milligrams in Maisie's morning dose, and the fact that I'd cut a pill in half in April when the refill was late, which I have never told a living soul, and which I think about every day of my life. It knew everything. Not like a mind reader, like a filing system. I said no to some of them, and I'll take the credit where it's owed. I logged the skylight. I reported the camera. I did not let anybody in on Thursday, and I sat in the truck with my brights on, and 2 kids in a Cavalier turned around in the entry loop and left. And the thing about saying no was that it never argued. It just waited and asked for something slightly larger. Wes stopped showing up on July 12th. I found out at shift change. I pulled in at 9:50 on a Sunday, and his truck was in the lot and he wasn't in it, which had never happened once. Doors unlocked, keys in the cup holder, half a Mountain Dew in the console, still cold, and his phone face down on the passenger seat with 11 missed calls from someone in his contacts, saved as "do not answer," which is the single most Wes thing I've ever encountered. I went in. I called his name for 2 hours. I did every wing, both levels, the loading bays, the mechanical rooms, the roof access. I went up the north wing to the partition 4 times, because that's where you go, isn't it? That's where the mind takes you. At 3:14, I was standing at the bottom of the south escalator when the handrail started. And I looked up into that dark and I thought, if it comes down here right now, I'm just gonna sit down, and I meant it. I was that tired. Nothing came down. I called the sheriff at 5 in the morning. Deputy came out, walked the lower ring with me, took a report, told me people leave. He said it like a diagnosis. People leave, Vern. Marla Quist called me the following afternoon.
Vern, hi, it's Marla. Do you have a minute? Great. So I'm looking at the incident report, and I just want to walk through a couple things with you. Right. No, I understand that. But from a documentation standpoint, Wes was a contractor, and his shift ended at 10 p.m., and there's no record of him clocking a shift extension. So from our perspective, the site was unattended between 10 p.m. and your arrival, which is a coverage gap. And coverage gaps are, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm telling you what the file has to say. His vehicle isn't our concern. His vehicle is a personal vehicle on a private lot. It'll be towed on the 14th. Vern, listen to me. I've had this account for 6 years. In 6 years, I have gone through 11 overnight associates at Northlight. 11. That's just the nature of a remote site. People take the job for a season, and then they get something better. And it's fine. It's normal. And if you're telling me you'd like to be number 12, then I'll start the posting today. And there's no hard feelings whatsoever. That's what I thought. Okay, so let's just get the report cleaned up.
11 and 6 years. I asked her to send me the names. She sent them. Because Marla is not evil. Marla is a woman with a spreadsheet and a boss. And I looked all 11 of them up over the course of a week at the library in town, because Maisie had swim lessons and I had time to kill. 2 of them I found on Facebook, alive, living in Arizona and Fergus Falls respectively, both of whom quit after less than 3 months, and neither of whom answered my message. 6 of them I couldn't find at all. Common names, no trace, nothing. 3 of them were dead. 1 heart attack at 62, which is just what happens to men. 1 car accident on County 12. And 1 named Gerald Vosberg, 44, who in 2017 went into Northlight Commons on a Tuesday overnight shift and cut a hole in the drywall partition on the upper northeast connector with a reciprocating saw. and then did something to himself with the same saw that the newspaper described as a self-inflicted injury, and the coroner's summary described in language I'm not going to repeat, in the hole he'd made, and was found there by a maintenance subcontractor 26 hours later. The partition was repaired in November of 2017. There's an invoice. I found it in the site binder in the guard shack, in a folder nobody had opened since it was filed, and it's for $4,100, and the line item says, "Interior partition restore to closed condition." Restore to closed condition. That was the night I understood what it had been asking me for the whole time. All the small stuff, the door, the camera, the scrappers, that was never the point. That was tuition. That was it teaching me how to say yes. The building isn't finished. That's the whole thing. That's the only thing. Emil Drager drew a shape and died before it was closed. And 80% of a shape is nothing. 80% of a circle is just a line. And it has been sitting out there in a bean field for 16 years, 210 feet short of being whatever it's supposed to be. And every couple of years, it finds a man with nowhere else to go. And it asks him nicely.
You've been reading. Gerald was not asked to do what he did to himself. That was Gerald. He opened the wall, and then he could see what he had opened. And a mind that cannot hold a thing will empty itself out to make room. That is not cruelty, Vern. That is capacity. You would not empty. You are a heavier vessel. You have carried 18 years, and a boy in a motel room, and a girl with a scar, and 14 months in a state facility, and you did not empty. That is why it has been you. 60 feet of half-inch board on steel stud, a saw, and 11 minutes, and in exchange. Listen carefully, because this is offered once. The graft in the child fails in her 22nd year. It is failing now, slowly. In a way, the labs will not show for 11 more years. She will be 22, and she will be told there is a list, and she will be 19th on that list, and she will not move up it. Open the wall, and she will not be 19th. Open the wall, and she is not on a list at all. And the wanting. 11 years, and it is still there when you wake, in the first 4 seconds, before the day arrives. I can take that out of you, not manage it, remove it. You would wake up, and there would be nothing there at all. You cannot verify any of this. That is the nature of it. You will simply have to decide whether I have ever one time told you something that was not true.
That was August 9th. On August 10th, I bought a reciprocating saw at Fleet Farm in Wadena. Milwaukee, 18 volt, 2 batteries, $199 on sale, plus a 5-pack of demolition blades. I paid cash. I put it in the toolbox in the bed of the truck, and I drove home, and I helped Maisie with a diorama about the water cycle out of a shoebox. Describing those 2 weeks accurately is hard, because from the outside, they were the best 2 weeks I'd had in years. I was pleasant. I made pancakes. I took her to the beach at the county park on a Thursday, and we stayed until the mosquitoes came out. I fixed the screen door I'd been not fixing since April. I called my sister in Grand Rapids for the first time in 2 years, and we talked for 40 minutes about absolutely nothing, because I'd decided. That's what nobody tells you about deciding to do something terrible. The relief of it is enormous. All that grinding stops. You've got a plan, and the plan is going to fix everything, and you can finally be nice to people again. If that sounds familiar to anybody listening, it should. It's the exact same relief as the drive to go get it. Not the getting, the deciding. That's the part that's warm. I was going to open the wall. I had a night picked, August 24th, a Sunday, because Sunday was my shift, and because Maisie was staying at Nova's for a sleepover, her first one ever, which she'd been talking about for 11 days straight. I had the saw. I had the batteries charged. I had walked the north wing 11 times with a flashlight, looking at that seam of taped and never painted board and working out where the studs were. And on the 18th of August, 6 days before, Maisie had a rough night and came into my room at 2 a.m. and got in bed like she used to when she was 5, and I asked her the question I'd been afraid to ask her for 4 years.
Because of the ambulance. When I was little and I got sick that time, and they took me in the ambulance, and you followed in the truck. I was on the bed in the back, and I could see out the little window, and I could see your headlights the whole way. And then at the light on 4th, they turned and I couldn't see them anymore, and I thought you weren't coming. I know you were coming. I know. I'm not stupid, Grandpa. But that's why. It's the bed. When I'm in the bed, I'm in the ambulance a little bit. On the couch, I can see the door.
I lay there for 2 more hours with her elbow in my ribs, and I did the thing I had spent 2 weeks not doing, which was think it through to the end. It had told me the truth every time. That was the whole design of it. 16 years of never once being caught in a lie, so that when it finally said the only thing that mattered, I'd have no reason to disbelieve it. Except every true thing it had ever told me was something it could not possibly have known, and I could not possibly have checked. My shoulder, my mother's name, the date in March, the half a pill in April. It wasn't proving it was honest. It was proving it was inside. And a thing that can reach into a man and pull out a tow motor from 1996 can also reach in and find the exact shape of the hole he's most afraid of and pour itself into that shape and say the words. It never told me one single thing about the world. Not one. Every fact it ever offered came out of my own skull, and the one prediction it made was about a day 13 years out, which is exactly as far away as a promise needs to be to never come due. And here's the part that finally did it. If it could reach into me that far, if it could see a liver graft failing in a 9-year-old girl in 2039, then why in the name of God was it asking a 52-year-old felon with a bad back to cut a hole in a wall? A thing that powerful doesn't need a guy with a saw. It needs a guy with a saw because it can't. Because it doesn't have hands here. Because 16 years and 11 men and a bean field, and it is still stuck on the wrong side of 5/8 inch of gypsum board. Whispering through a paging system with no power to it, asking and asking and asking and only asking. It's not a god. It's a guy at the door who needs you to invite him in. That's the oldest sales pitch there is, and I have heard it before, in a parking lot, from a man with a bag in his coat, and the pitch is always the same. It is always warm, and it is always reasonable, and it always knows exactly what hurts. I got up at 5 and made coffee, and I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up, and I felt something I had genuinely not felt since a Wednesday in October 6 years back, and it took me a while to place it. I was furious. I went in on the 24th anyway. Maisie was at Nova's. I had the saw. I parked in the usual spot at 9:50, and I sat there until 11, and then I went in through the west service door, and I did not do my sweep. I went straight up the south escalator and down the north wing, and I stood in front of that partition with the saw in my hand and the flashlight on the floor pointed up, and I said, out loud, "Come on then." Nothing. I said, "You've had a lot to say for 2 months." And nothing. And I stood there like an idiot for 20 minutes, yelling at drywall. At 3:08, I heard the handrails start. The next part I've had to sit with a long time to get straight. It came up the escalator, and it came down the north wing, and it did not browse. Not this time. It came at that same unhurried pace, but it did not stop at a single storefront. And I stood there with my back to a wall I had come to open, and I watched 9 feet of gray, nothing walk, 210 feet toward me, and the whole way it was ducking under things that weren't there. It stopped maybe 15 feet from me, close enough that I could see the texture. And I'll say this because it's the true detail. It doesn't smell like anything. Nothing that big should be that absent. And then it did the hand thing. The waist-height motion, palm up, fingers opening. The picking something off a table motion in an empty corridor with nothing between us. It held out its hand, and the seam of its mouth came open about an inch, and the woman's voice came out of the ceiling speakers behind me and above me, 40 feet down the corridor, in both directions, all of them at once, and it said, "The saw, Vern." I threw the saw at it, not heroically. There was no plan in it whatsoever. I threw a 9-pound reciprocating saw at a 9-foot entity because my body reached the end of its rope, and it went right through where the thing's chest was and hit the partition behind it and put a dent in the drywall, about the size of a fist. The gray man did not react to the saw. The gray man reacted to the dent. Its head came around, not turned, came around, that 110-degree rotation, and it looked at that small dent in the board, and every ceiling speaker in the north wing made a sound. I've heard exactly one other time in my life, which was in a hallway at street. Mary's, when a woman 2 doors down was told about her husband. It went to the wall, 9 feet of it, folded down onto its knees, both long hands flat on the board on either side of that dent, and it stayed there. I did not stick around to watch. I went down that corridor in 54 seconds, and down the escalator with the handrail still running, and across center court under the skylight, and out the west service door, and I did not look back one single time. I got in the truck, and I drove out of that lot at a speed that was frankly unsafe on gravel. And here's the thing I didn't understand until I was 11 miles down the highway with the windows open and my hands shaking on the wheel. It hadn't been able to pick up the saw. It couldn't touch the dent. It knelt there with its hands on either side of a hole a 9-pound tool had made, and it could not fix it, and it could not make it bigger, and all that thing has ever been able to do in 16 years is stand in an empty store and pretend to hold something. I quit that morning. Called Marla at 8, said I was done effective immediately, and she said, "Okay, Vern," and asked me to leave the keys in the guard shack, and that was the entire conversation. 20 seconds. 6 months of my life. I work at a metal fab shop in a town 40 minutes the other direction now. The owner's a guy named Otto, who did 9 months himself in the 90s and does not care about my record, and pays me $2 an hour less than the ghost did. The insurance is worse. It's not nothing, but it's worse. Maisie's copay went from $14 to $91, and there's a prior authorization every 90 days that I have to fight for on the phone on my lunch break. And in February, I sold the 4-wheeler, and in April, I sold my dad's shotgun, which I've been telling myself for 20 years I was keeping for Corey. We're fine. That's not a brave thing to say, it's just true. We eat a lot of rice. She started swim team. She sleeps in her bed about half the time now, because we moved it so she can see the door, which took me 4 years and 11 minutes to figure out. And I told her about her dad. Not all of it. The version where he was funny, and he was the funniest person I have ever known. And the version where the thing that killed him was a sickness and not a choice, which I have decided to believe, because she needs it, and because it might even be right. She asked if he ever said anything about her. And I said he texted me about her once, at 4 a.m, and he was so proud of her he couldn't wait until a decent hour. That's the first real lie I've ever told her. And I'd tell it again 1,000 times. And the wanting is still there. I'll say that too, because it offered to take it, and I didn't let it. 11 years, and it's still there in the first 4 seconds after I open my eyes. Every morning, a small gray room off the hallway of my day. Some days I don't go in. Some days I stand in the doorway a while, but it's mine. It came from my life, and I earned every inch of it. And there is not one thing in this world I'd trade it to that building for. I drove past Northlight Commons in May, not on purpose. Maisie had a meet in Detroit Lakes, and the route takes you past the entry loop. There's a sign at the highway now. Big one. Professional. With a rendering on it of a distribution center. A long gray building with trucks at the docks and little cartoon trees. 640,000 square feet. 210 jobs. Which is a number I had to pull over about. And underneath it, in smaller letters, it says site preparation begins fall. Site preparation. That's what they call it. You bring in a high-reach excavator with a shear attachment, And you go through a building, like Northlight, from the top down, and you open every wall in it, every single one, in about 11 days, and there is not a man on that crew who is going to be asked politely first. I thought about calling somebody. I got as far as the county planning office's number on my phone in the parking lot of a swim meet, and then I thought about what a felon with an assault conviction and 18 years of history sounds like, explaining that a shape in a bean field needs to stay 80% finished. So I did the only thing I could think of that a person could actually do. I wrote it down. All of it. Everything. The corridor times and the handrails and the 11 names and Gerald Vosberg and the invoice that says restore to closed condition. I made 3 copies. One's in a safe deposit box, one's with my sister in Grand Rapids, and one's in the glove box of my truck. Because when it happens, and it's going to happen, they've got financing, there's a rendering with cartoon trees on it, somebody's going to want to know why the site went bad. And there's going to be some woman like Marla with a spreadsheet saying, it's just the nature of a remote project. People leave. That's normal. And there's going to be one guy on that crew. There always is. One guy with nowhere else to go and a kid who needs something and a shoulder that's never been right since some year in the 90s, standing in a corridor at 3:14 in the morning while something polite and patient tells him true things about his own life and offers to take the worst of it away. If that's you, and you ever hear this, it can't lift the saw. That's all it is. That's the whole secret. 16 years and 11 men, and the only thing that has ever gotten through that wall is a person who decided to help. Please, don't help.